Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Today we're on estate planning of the rich and famous, and I figured it would be timely and interesting to dive into what's likely to happen following the passing of Queen Elizabeth, who just recently passed away on September 8th, 2022. Many people are fascinated with the royal family, right? And while many are fascinated, it would also be appropriate to mention that the royal family comes with some not great things too in our history books. As always, I try to stay fact-based here on Legal Tea, so I think it would be inappropriate if I did not mention the things that are in our history books that are directly related to the royal family. And if you want to learn more, I just encourage you to do some of your own research. Nonetheless, today is estate planning of the rich and famous, right? And I think we could all agree that whether we like the royal family or not, Queen Elizabeth is not only rich, but she's famous. Before we talk about who is supposedly going to get what, let's get our people straight, especially for those people who don't quite keep up with the royal family. So Queen Elizabeth is actually Queen Elizabeth II, as she was the first child of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. Though because she has reigned for so long, people sort of informally call her Queen Elizabeth, even though she's technically the second. According to a Yahoo Life article written by Jason Pham, she began her reign in 1952, when she was a mere 25 years old, and she began her reign due to the passing of her father. Prior to her becoming the queen, she married Philip Mountbatten, who was a former prince of Greece and Denmark, and they married in November 1947. Philip died just over a year before Elizabeth died. He actually died in April of 2021. Together, Elizabeth and Philip had 4 children: Charles, who's now King Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. Following Elizabeth's rather surprising passing on September 8th, 2022, people started whispering, well, who's going to inherit the fortune, the money, the houses, the jewelry? Unfortunately for us here on Legal Tea, but very fortunately for her family, her estate plan is not public. But according to the Yahoo Life article, there have been numerous reports who will inherit what. And that's what we're here for, right? Well, this handy-dandy Yahoo Life article breaks down inheritances based on person. So let's just follow their lead and go person by person, shall we? Starting with now King Charles. So for starters, King Charles will inherit the Sovereign Grant, which is a fund funded by taxpayers to the royal family. Interestingly, if you're a history buff, you may enjoy this. At least I thought it was kind of interesting. So what I was interested about is how this all came about. Well, the Sovereign Grant, quote, originated from an agreement made by King George III in 1760, who agreed to surrender his income from Parliament to receive a set annual payment for himself and future generations of the British royal family. Furthermore, in regards to this Sovereign Grant, quote, the British royal family receives a grant in exchange for surrendering their profits from the Crown estate, the family's collection of lands and holdings worth $19 billion to the government, end quote. The explanation continues, quote, each year the reigning monarch receives 25% of the Crown estate's profits. The amount pays for property upkeep and utilities, the British royal family's travel and royal employee payroll. And just to give you some numbers to chew on, in 2021, the Crown Estate generated a net profit of $361 million. The United Kingdom Treasury paid the Queen a sovereign grant of $100 million, which is the equivalent of about $1.50 from each person in the United Kingdom. end quote. Something else really interesting about the sovereign passing from Elizabeth to Charles is that it will be tax-free. Yep, you heard me right. No inheritance tax will be owed by Charles. Here's why. According to an NPR article, while regular citizens in the country have to pay inheritance tax, and specifically 40% when estates exceed £325,000 or about $374,000 US, an agreement was made in 1993 between the monarchy and the then Prime Minister John Major, and that stated that assets passing from a sovereign to their rightful successor are not subject to inheritance tax. Wow. Okay, let's talk about the other kiddos of Elizabeth. So Anne, Andrew, and Edward, and what they are likely to receive following her passing. Well, if you thought that now King Charles would get to keep all of that sovereign grant, you would be wrong. In fact, according to the Yahoo Life article, Anne, Andrew, and Edward will all receive a share of the grant, even though it is, quote, owned now by Charles. The exact amount of their shares is not known and may never be known. Beyond the money, let's talk about Elizabeth's corgis. I'm a dog person, so you better believe that I wondered what was going to happen to her beloved dogs. Well, according to a BBC article, Andrew, her son, is set to inherit the Queen's 2 corgis. But it may be because Andrew and his 2 daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, are the ones that gave the corgis to Elizabeth in the first place in 2021. They got Elizabeth the corgis to help cheer her up while Elizabeth's husband, Philip, was in the hospital during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, next we're going to talk about Prince William. So if you're keeping track, Elizabeth had 4 children: Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. Charles, since he is the oldest and firstborn, became the king, right, after Elizabeth's passing. Well, at Charles' passing, when he passes, Charles' oldest and firstborn, William, will become the king. Side note, Harry, which is William's brother, Charles's other son, is who's married to Meghan Markle. So just to clear some things up, it does not, the sovereign, it does not go to Princess Anne at Charles' passing. It basically goes down the bloodline of the oldest. So it's gone to Charles, and then Charles's son William will inherit the throne at Charles's passing. And then at William's passing, he and his wife Kate have 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. So at William's passing, George will become king. I know it's kind of confusing. I hope you hung with me through that. If you didn't know how that all worked, I figured it was kind of important to lay out. All right, back to King Charles's son, William, and what he is likely to get from Elizabeth after her passing. Prince William is set to receive the Duchy of Cornwall, which is a private estate worth, around $1.2 billion with a B. It's where King Charles lived prior to taking over. The estate, crazy enough, covers 140,000 acres in the United Kingdom. According to the Yahoo Life article, the Duchy of Cornwall was established in 1331 to financially support the heir to the throne. The Duchy of Cornwall, which will provide the income for Prince William and his wife Kate, is funded through the ownership and operation of land in rural and urban areas, as well as islands and rental cottages in Wales, Cornwall, and other areas in the United Kingdom. So it sounds like Prince William and Princess Kate are going to do just fine. And speaking of Miss Kate, speaking of Princess Kate, what is she expected to get, you ask? According to a Radar Online article, Princess Kate is likely to inherit around $110 million in jewelry from the Queen's collection. And to clarify, too, these pieces belong to Elizabeth personally and not the Crown estate. One piece of jewelry that is said to be not within the $110 million in jewelry going to Kate is the, quote, Spencer tiara, which is the diamond crown that Princess Diana wore in her wedding to now King, then Prince Charles. Supposedly, the tiara will be inherited by Kate and William's daughter, Princess Charlotte. Good for little Charlotte. I love that little nod to her. Well, maybe a nod to her and to William's biological mother, Diana, who passed away tragically in a car accident in 1997. Now let's shift to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Oh, I'm sure a lot of you are on the edge of your seat about this. If you have lived under a rock, my friends, there has been a lot of what's a respectful way to say drama within the royal family, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. We don't have time to dive into it during this episode, but speaking of what they're set to likely get from Harry's grandmother, Elizabeth, is rather unclear, is what experts and sources say. So I'm not too sure what to say on this one. What we do know is that Harry and Meghan did a tell-all interview with Oprah in March of 2021, which about made the world start spinning in a different direction. Though, something we learned from it was that Prince Harry used funds from the trust he had following his mother's passing, Princess Diana's passing, after now King and then Prince Charles, quote, cut them off financially at the start of 2020, following Harry and Meghan's exit from the British royal family and move to the United States, end quote. Even though it is rather unclear what Prince Harry will get from his grandmother, it is widely assumed that Meghan and her and Prince Harry's two children, Archie and Lilibet, they're likely to receive nothing of real value. There are some whispers like maybe they'll get some jewelry of really no significant value, or perhaps Princess Kate may share some of the $110 million in jewelry with her sister-in-law Meghan and niece Lilibet. Will she? Oh, who knows? But does she have to? Most definitely not. As we wrap this episode up, it's important to remember that Queen Elizabeth II just passed, so I'm certain more and more will come out. It's just so new, so fresh. So I tell you what, do not come at me if something ends up being slightly, or well, even massively wrong from this episode. Alrighty, let's wrap this episode up. Next week, we are back to a cautionary tale episode where we talk about real-life clients, real-life cases that I or my office have worked on. During that episode, we're going to be talking about a client that after presenting to my office a copy of their current revocable living trust, we discovered not only was the document essentially a hunk of junk, but after doing some more research, we found out that the attorney that drafted it had actually gotten suspended. Well, for what, you ask? Well, you just have to tune in next time, Legal Tea listeners. Until next Tuesday, take care and be well.